How are you? And thanks for tuning into another video from the Open Author. My name is David B. Lyons, and today we're going to be discussing that old adage of how you can get over your writer's block. Now, I've had a lot of emails over a lot of years, and a lot of students come up to me and talk to me about this particular problem, writer's block. So I have cobbled together 5 really good tips, not shit tips that you might hear on some websites and some other YouTube videos, no names mentioned. But these are going to be key tips that will help you get over writer's block, okay? So let's get straight to it. Right, so the first thing that you need to take into consideration when it comes to writer's block is this. This is key. Your first draft is not supposed to be great. It's not supposed to be of high quality. So forget this idea of producing gold on your first draft, because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen to Stephen King. It's not going to happen to you. So don't feel pressure to come up with the goods on draft number 1. And I think that's the major problem some students have, is they think that when they're writing their first draft, it has to look as if it's going to look when, you know, the book finally comes out, that it needs to be of this quality. That's not the way it works. Draft number 1 is for getting your story down. It's for getting the bones of your story down. The flesh and the blood that make a story whole will be painted on later. So don't feel the pressure that everything you write in the first draft has to be of a high quality. Just get the bones of your story down. So if you relieve yourself of that pressure, you're already going to eliminate some of the writer's block for you, okay, for yourself. And I'm not going to give you some shit tips like go for a run or meditate or do some yoga, because they're not conducive, okay? That's not going to help you get over your writer's block. Maybe you do need to rest your mind a bit if your mind is a bit overactive or numb. And perhaps those tips can work, but we're going to get to the nub of getting behind your writer's block and removing it and dislodging it from your mind, okay? So tip number 1 from me to get over your writer's block is plot well. Now, I know some of you are going to be rolling your eyes at this tip, because inherently within certain creatives, especially when it comes to novel writing, there are 2 groups of people. There are people who do plot, and there are people who pants, okay? There's plotters and pantsers. So fly by the seat of your pants, people who make up their story as they're going along, or people who plot, who follow a structure that they've drawn out before they even begin to write their story. Now, I know pantsers will be rolling their eyes at me, okay? But here's the thing. If you plot your story before you even begin to write it, well, then you always have direction. You always know where you're going. So the chances of you getting writer's block reduce massively. Whereas if you're a pantser, if you are somebody who just opens up their laptop and reads the last chapter that they wrote and then think, right, what will I do next with my story? Now, I'm not saying there are not great writers out there who pants. There are some fantastic writers. Some of the great writers pants. But they're experienced and they've been through the process lots of times. But if you're starting off and you're trying to write that first novel and you keep hitting roadblocks on the way, it's because you're not plotting accurately. So if you are opening your laptop and you're reading the last chapter you wrote and you're thinking, where will I take my story next? Well, then you're increasing your chances of having writer's block on a regular basis exponentially, hugely, because you don't know where you're going next. So that obviously lends itself to the reason of why you are stuck or why you have writer's block. So it can be even this simple. Even if you have a bullet point list of where your story is going to go, well, then when you sit down and open up your laptop to see what your next chapter is going to be about, and there's even a small bullet point that says Margaret and Barney fall out. That's it. Just something simple. Your 2 characters fall out. They have a falling out. Well, then you at least, even though that's half a sentence, a bullet point, well, then at least you know where you're going with your next chapter. So you're reducing the chances of writer's block because you have even that small bullet point to go on. And then you're going to try and build a 2,000 word chapter around that bullet point. But at least you know where you're going. So it gives you a jump start. Whereas if you don't have that bullet point and you haven't plotted and you're not sure where you're going next, well then, of course, you're going to have writer's block, because the first thing you need to do is figure out where you're going next before you even begin writing, which is a form of plotting. But if you plot beforehand, well, then you always know where you're going, and therefore you're reducing massively the chances of you getting writer's block on a regular basis. So that just makes an awful lot of common sense. We'll move on to tip number 2, which is not going to annoy pantsers. So tip number 2 is just write. Now I know that sounds like an absolutely god-awful piece of shit advice, right? So yeah, so just telling people who have writer's block to just write is a bit like, I suppose, telling somebody who has depression to just get over it, smile. But what I'm trying to suggest here is something I said at the very top of the video. Draft 1 that you're stuck on, that you're trying to get to and you keep getting writer's block, it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be high quality. So as I always say to my students, draft 1 is get the story down. Get to the point where you're typing the end. And that's it, okay? That's draft 1. It's not going to be glorious. It's not going to be publishable. It's not going to have an agent frantically dialing you up and saying, I want to offer representation, because it's going to be shit, right? So draft 1 is just about getting the bones of your whole plot down. You're going to go back over it in draft 2, and you're going to add the flesh and the blood, and then you're going to add the makeup, and then you're going to add the hairstyle, and suddenly you're going to have a model of a book, okay? But do not feel the pressure to have draft 1 be brilliant. And therefore, if you follow that guidance, you're going to reduce your chances of getting writer's block, because you know that you're not putting yourself under any pressure to write a masterpiece in draft 1. So when I say just write, I mean just get your plot down, even if there's spelling mistakes in it, grammar mistakes and punctuation errors, and even if the story is a little bit shit, just continue writing, get to the end of that chapter, and then what you might do then later on, when you feel as if you're in a better frame of mind, and at least you have maybe 2,000 words that you've written, even if you think they're shit, well, what you will do then is add some flesh and bones, so you'll be going back over it and making it come more alive. You're improving it constantly as you're going through drafts. So even if you feel as if you have writer's block, I would just tempt you to just write. And even if it is shit, at least you're getting some structure down and some plot down, and then what you can do then is improve it when you go back over it. So if you have writer's block and you're sitting in front of a blank page, just start typing, even if it's taking your story in a different direction, or in the wrong direction, or even if your characterization has gone awry and your narrative approach is not consistent with what had been previous. Just write, because all those things that have gone wrong can be improved. You can reshape them and improve them, but at least you're improving something. You have something to go on. Whereas if you're just staring in front of a blank page like that, you ain't never going to write anything, okay? So write, even if it's shit, you will go back over it and improve it, because you are giving yourself at least some bones to work from. So if you do have writer's block, just start typing on those keys, and even if it's absolute rubbish, at least you are being productive and you do have something to work on and improve there later. So let's get to tip number 3. So I've given you 2 tips already. One is plot. I'm serious about that one. 2 is if you are feeling writer's block, just write, even if it's rubbish, just write away. Tip number 3 is read. Okay, so this is something I do. Now, it's very rare. I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't suffer with writer's block often. There are times when I can get frustrated with my manuscript and I'm not quite sure where to take another plot point, but because I plot so meticulously from the beginning before I even write, I kind of always know where I'm going. I always have a structure to follow. So I don't feel as if I'm ever opening up my laptop and staring at a blank page, because I'm one of those that will always have at least a bullet point on where to go next with my story. But if I do get frustrated and I'm not quite sure where I'm going next, and I don't know what to do with this blank page, what I will do is I will open up a book from an author that I love. Now, if you're writing psychological crime thrillers like I do, you're not going to pick up a Cecilia Ahern book to relax, okay? So you're going to want to pick up a book that relates to the genre and the tone that you write in. So for me, for example, because I write psychological crime thrillers, I will pick up a Paula Hawkins book or a Gillian Flynn book or a Dean Koontz book, because I know that the tone that they write in, they're my three favourite authors, the tone that they write in is the type of tone that I try to give to my books. So at least I know that as I'm reading through Gillian or Paula or Dean's books, that I'm getting my mindset into the right frame of mind for writing myself. So if you are suffering from writer's block, I would take half an hour or an hour out, pick up a book that lends itself to the type of book that you're trying to write, and get into that book. Read about 3 or 4 chapters of it, because it will give you the tone, which is important. It will give you some pacing, and it will give you good sentence structure and characterization and all these other things that I can waffle on about, narrative style. So it will imprint them into your head, because if you're reading, you're learning from that, and then suddenly you're in that mindset. So you know when you're watching a movie and your mindset shifts. So if you're watching something romantic like The Notebook, well then suddenly, you know, you feel as if you're in that fluffy frame of mind. It gives you that sort of tone to your mindset. Or if you're watching Goodfellas, you know, you've been watching Goodfellas late at night on your laptop, and your ma comes in and asks you if you want any supper, and you go, fuck yeah, I want some supper, because you're in that tone of mind, you're in that frame of mind from watching Goodfellas. So the same thing happens, that mindset that a movie can give us, a book can give us even more so, because we're engrossed more in a book than we are in a movie, because we have to make up the pictures ourselves in our own mind. So when you engross yourself in the tone of book that lends itself to the type of book you're trying to write, well then you're giving yourself an advantage. So give yourself a half an hour with a Gillian Flynn book, put Gillian aside, open up your laptop, get that blank page, and then at least you're in the mindset, you're in that tone and that frame of mind to begin your writing. And then we'll move on to the next tip, which is be consistent with your writing. Now, what I mean by this is, if you are, and I know there's so many of you out there that are trying to write a book and they're holding down a full-time job and probably even 2 kids and a dog and a cat at home. But the thing about it is you need to be consistent with your writing habits. Because if you are trying to write a book, but you're only getting to it every 10 days or, you know, once a week or on a Saturday morning, well then you're taking yourself out of the mindset of the book, and therefore when you open up the laptop to try and write, you're met with a blank page and a blank mind. So then you're getting double whammy of writer's block. Whereas if you are consistent with your writing, if you're writing at say 7:30 every morning before you go to work, you're going to give yourself half an hour, well then you are constantly in the mindset of your book. The idea, the whole concept, the life of that book is at the forefront of your mind. It's not a week later and it's drifted to the back of your mind. So therefore you are constantly thinking about that book, and if you are consistent with it, you will find that the writer's blockage reduces. So one thing that I do to reduce the possibility of writer's block happening to me is I will read, the last thing at night I will do is I will read what I'd written that day. Now I'm sure there's going to be some sleep therapists out there who think this is shit advice, and they'll probably curse me for saying this, but if you are falling asleep with your book in your mind, well then you're probably likely to be considering it as you're asleep. Therefore when you wake up in the morning, it's still at the forefront of your mind, and then when you do open up the laptop, writer's block is reduced because your book is prominent in your thinking. So read what you had written as the last thing you do at night as you're falling asleep, and then sleep on it. And then when you wake up the next morning, your book is still fresh in your mind. And that's why I say be consistent, because what it does do is it keeps your book fresh in your mind constantly. So if you work at 7:30 every morning to write a half an hour of your book, do it every morning. Be consistent with that. Because if you leave it for a week or two and then you're trying to come back to it, of course, it's common sense, you will suffer from writer's block. So be consistent is another key tip to rid yourself of writer's block. Another one is delete distractions. I mean, we're distracted now more than we could ever be. So, you know, in the hundreds of years that people have been writing literature, right now, this day and age is the most distracted anybody could possibly ever be. And the reason for that is, we work on laptops. Years ago they used to work with pen and paper and then typewriters, which didn't offer distractions. Laptops offer a million different distractions, okay? So tip number 1 when it comes to deleting distractions, when you're writing your book, Wi-Fi to fuck, turn that off. Absolutely, it needs to go. So you scroll up, you turn your Wi-Fi off, because it's just you and a Word document or you on a blank page. Because with laptops we've got apps and we've got games and we've got websites and we've got all sorts of distractions on that laptop. So the idea of turning out Wi-Fi is going to help you massively when it comes to engaging in your manuscript, engaging in your story. It deletes the high possibility of writer's block or disengagement from your story if you have Wi-Fi turned off. That goes without saying. So when it comes to research, so this can kind of annoy me. So I am writing and then I think, I need to know the name of a cafe in the middle of Dublin city centre. And then I think I'll go on my Wi-Fi no, I'm not turning on the Wi-Fi. So just leave that blank or put a question mark is what I do, and then come back to that later when you do turn your Wi-Fi on. So Wi-Fi off, distractions away. So kids, wife or husband or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is, out you go. I'm writing now, I need quiet, I need a distraction-free environment in which to write from. So get rid of distractions, get yourself in a quiet place, turn that Wi-Fi off, just you, your fingers and a Word document, and off you go. Now they are my 5 key tips when it comes to getting over writer's block, okay? And if you take them on board, you will find you're giving yourself a better platform in which to begin the writing process every day. But if you take them on board and you still find that when you're opening your laptop that the words aren't flowing or that you need to stew on things a bit more, there might be a couple of things wrong. Firstly, the time of day in which you're writing might be wrong. It might not suit you, because some people are morning people, some people are evening people, and if you're not a morning person and you have decided that you're going to write every morning, you're not giving yourself the best chance of writing a great book. So you might consider changing your 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. writing time to 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. And aside from that, so find your writing time. When is your brain most active? When are you most creative? And then aside from that, maybe your writing environment might necessarily be right. So, I know guys that are trying to write books and they're trying to write them in their car before they go to work in the morning. Maybe that works, that solitary might work. But what I do want you to find is somewhere that's comfortable, where you are distraction free. And, if you're finding that you've got a lot of writer's block and the words just aren't coming out, maybe the environment is wrong, maybe the timing is wrong. So you might want to look at those 2 particular things. Another thing that has helped students in the past, now this advice was offered to me from another student, and then I looked into it and researched it and found out that this actually is real. You might consider chewing gum. I know that sounds a bit fucking stupid, but you might consider chewing gum as you're writing, because it is scientifically proven that it helps with the thought process. It helps with the creative process. So that's why you will find Sir Alex Ferguson, famously as a football manager, was always chewing on the sideline, because it helped him think things through. What was going on in front of him, it made things become more clear to him. An awful lot of football managers do it. Not just football managers, coaches of all sporting arenas chew gum to help them through the process of thinking. So if you are staring at a blank page, maybe pop in some gum. I'm not saying it's going to work. Somebody suggested this to me a couple of years ago, and then I have offered it since as a solution to writer's block to other students. Maybe chewing gum as you're writing will help with the thought process. So it's just a small little tip that I'm going to add in there. I've never done it, I haven't tried it, so I can't say that it works from personal experience, but I have had students come back to me and say it has worked for them. So I hope this is better advice than go for a run or go for a swim, or that other sort of nonsense advice that you might get or you might have heard before when you've brought up the subject of your writer's block. So get in touch with me. If you are still suffering from writer's block after trying on these tips that I have suggested in this video, get in touch with me by email, visit my website theopenauthor.com, and I will try and help you as best I can through that again. So I would love it if, I'm always saying this at the end of the videos, I'm getting bored of it now, but subscribe to these videos so you get access to them as soon as they appear on YouTube. And do check out my website. I've already plugged it, but I'll plug it again, theopenauthor.com. And if you are looking to share some of your writing examples to see if you are any good, you can share them on the Facebook group Future Author Society, where other like-minded people like yourself who are trying to write their first novel have gathered, and they are all trying to help each other out. And I pop in there every now and then to offer some guidance and advice too. So I might see you in there, or I might hear from you from email, or maybe I'll just see you at the next video. Either way, happy writing. I hope this video helps, and I'll see you soon.